Let's talk about VA loans, Veteran Assistance Loans. If you are in the military, if you served in the military before, guess what? You're likely eligible for a VA loan, and I'm telling you right now, they are the best deal around.
What we want to do is deep dive some of the VA aspects and how good they are. I've never served in the military, but I do come from a military family. My father was a retired colonel. Because of that, I have a very, very profound need to make sure my veterans are taken care of. One of the things that gets my ire up and gets my dandruff going more than anything is watching companies that utilize VA marketing to act as predators on veterans. So first thing I just want to get out there and get in your head is just because veteran is in the name of the mortgage company or it's something that seems patriotic doesn't necessarily mean that it is. The thing about VA is all lenders that are VA approved can do VA. And we all have various ways of doing them well or not well. It's important that you work with a lender that understands the ins and outs of VA and takes the time to explain it to you. If you do this well, this could be a very, very, very good decision. If it is done poorly, it can get you in a lot of trouble. What you can do with VA is VA can be 100% financing, meaning you don't have to put any money down. And you can do that without mortgage insurance, which is awesome. So usually if you do a conventional loan or an FHA loan, if you don't put down 20%, you're gonna have a mortgage insurance premium on that file. With a VA loan, there is no mortgage insurance premium, which means you can buy more house with no money down without mortgage insurance. That's huge. The one thing VA does have is what's called a funding fee. VA funding fee is a little bit different than a FHA mortgage insurance premium that we've talked about previously. VA funding fee is essentially VA tacking on a certain amount of money onto your loan balance, depending on the amount of times you've done a VA loan, and it increases your loan amount. For example, the first time you use VA, they tack on 2.15%. Second time you use VA, they tack on 3.3%. When you get out of the military, or if you are already out, if you've got disability, VA will waive that funding fee for life. It's huge, huge amount of money saved right there. Okay, so it's very important that you think about, am I getting out with disability? Do I have disability right now? If you do, that's a great opportunity to utilize VA without having to pay that funding fee. VA is like every other type of mortgage out there. It's the four-leg table approach. It's going to be your debt-to-income ratio, it's going to be your credit score, credit report, your loan-to-value, and your assets. Okay, we're going to look at those the same way we look at with any other loan. Now, there are some easier credit guidelines around VA that don't exist with conventional. So, usually with the VA, lowest score you can get a VA loan is going to be 580. It kind of depends per the lender, but usually it's going to be 580. It gets good at about 620. So if you got a 620 and above, VA all day. Okay. The other big kickers with VA is VA doesn't necessarily have the maximum loan requirements that a conventional or FHA loan has. It's possible to buy $1 million house with a VA loan. Once you go above the normal conforming loan limits, which again will depend on the county that you're in, VA may require that you put some money down in that process, and there's a calculation that we put together for you to show you what your required down payment is going to be. But you can buy $1 million house with a VA loan. You also can have more than one VA loan. So for example, you buy a house and let's say that you're stationed in Kentucky, okay, and you used your VA the first time and you bought a house in Kentucky, and then you PCS to Colorado where we're at. You can keep your house in Kentucky and we can utilize your VA eligibility to buy a new house in Colorado. Now, again, there may be some required down payment at that point, but it can be done. VA allows you to have two VA loans going active at the same time. You don't have to sell your property. So let's talk about the four-leg table. Let's talk about number one, active duty, debt-to-income ratio. Okay, so debt-to-income ratio is your money coming in versus your money going out. We're going to take your base pay plus your BAH plus your BAS, and on occasionally some of your special duty pay. Okay, depending on what you do and if it's going to continue if you PCS to a new location. So with the base pay, pretty easy to calculate. BAH is going to be based on, are you changing duty station? So let's say you're stationed in Tennessee and you come out to Colorado, your BAH is probably going up. We're going to utilize your new BAH for the place that you're coming to. The opposite would be if you're in Hawaii and you're coming to Colorado, your BAH is going down. So we've got to use the BAH at the place that you're arriving at. Okay?
And honestly speaking, once you have your PCS orders, just a copy of those orders is all that we actually need to calculate the appropriate BAH for your final destination.
We can also utilize a calculation to gross up your BAH and your BAS because it's non-taxable income. We can actually use a little bit more than what you're actually getting. So a lot of times, and this is a little trick, there's a lot of times I'll talk to a borrower who has been going through another lender and they don't know that little magical calculation and they don't qualify. Well, I look at it, I'm able to throw a little bit of extra income there because I do a lot of VA loans, bump up that DTI a little bit. Debt to income ratio on a VA loan is a little different than an FHA and a conventional. VA is going to allow for a higher debt to income ratio on occasion. If we've got strong legs on the other three strong legs on the table, we are able to get our debt to income ratio to be able to be a little bit higher sometimes. The important thing for us in our practice is we want you comfortable, not qualified. Again, we have done you no service if you are stretching every dollar to make your mortgage payment. Yep. When we qualify you, if we tell you that your $600,000 house is going to be X payment and that is uncomfortable for you, then we've got to make sure that we get in line with where you are comfortable making that mortgage payment. That might mean buying a little bit less house.
Let's say that you are under contract on someplace and now it's time for you to do an appraisal with your VA loan. A huge misconception in the market today are all the unique things that have to happen on a VA appraisal compared to every other type of appraisal. But the reality is this: the VA wants to make sure that you as the veteran are protected, that you're not buying something that's honestly just a giant dumpster fire.
So the way VA appraisals work is they're different than a conventional and an FHA appraisal. First off, we have to order the appraisal directly through VA. When we do that, what we do is we order it through VA. VA then assigns it to a VA appraiser. They then go out and do the appraisal. We have no contact with that appraiser. That appraisal might come back with what's called subject to. Again, we've talked about it before, but that just might mean that there's something wrong that needs to be fixed with the property. Right. Again, VA is looking out to make sure that there's nothing that is going to be a health or safety issue for you or your family as you're buying this house. In certain parts of the country, there are other little things that they look for. Sometimes it's termites, sometimes it's bugs, things like that.
Scorpions, do they ever check for scorpions?
Sometimes.
I'm deathly afraid of scorpions. Do they check for scorpions? Okay.
But ultimately, the goal of the VA appraisal is to make sure that the veteran is protected. One of the things that will happen on a VA appraisal on occasion is if that appraisal is going to come in short, the VA will give us an alert called a VA Tidewater. Tidewater means, alert, this property is coming in short. We call the agents and we say, hey agents, justify the value of this property with comps. The agents will put together, and I say agents, usually it's the listing agent, putting together a list of comparable sales that then justify the sale price of that property. We give it to the VA appraiser. If they agree, they'll use those comps and we might come in at value. If they don't agree, we might come in short.
This is actually really wild. The government's all about acronyms, graphs, and tables, right? And so when they look at the value of a house and they realize like, hey guys, this is coming in under like value, 9 times out of 10 in the government space, when something 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, you're out. But Tidewater is this really radically, I would say, creative solution that they come up with to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're not being reactive enough to a positively appreciating market.
Maybe I'm missing something.
Please, let's take this moment to let the listing and the buyer's agent provide the appropriate data that's necessary to validate whatever the sales contract is. Yep. Honestly, it's very special. No other loan type has this type of mechanism to save a purchase transaction from going sideways.
Yeah. Closing costs are a little bit different on a VA loan and things that are allowed to be paid for by the seller. Unlike any other type of loan, VA allows for the seller to make a 3% contribution to paying down debt for a borrower, which is crazy. Now, does it happen all the time? Sometimes. But you as the VA borrower can request as part of the contract that the seller pays off 3% of your debt load. And it's allowed. They also allow for up to 3% contribution towards closing costs.
Let's take a time out here and kind of focus on this, because Brett's talking about debt load. We're legitimately talking about a credit card.
Credit cards, car payments. So let's say you're in a situation where you're really close on debt to income ratio, okay? And you're really close to being in that comfort zone, okay? But you've got there's a $6,000 credit card out there that has a $300 monthly payment on it.
Right.
If we have enough room in that 3%, we can request that the seller pay that off as part of the closing. Closing costs themselves can be handled in a different way. And something that's also kind of specific with our company. There are what are called VA non-allowables, which are things that the VA does not allow to be charged to the veteran. Our company has basically removed those non-allowables from our transaction. We don't charge any lender fees for a VA borrower. Again, I say that again. We do not charge any lender fees to a VA borrower.
We make our money when you make your payments on time. As an organization that is going to service your loan, when you make those payments, that is in fact when we make it. So we're actually partnering with you to say, hey, we want to service this debt load over the entire duration of the time that you own this home. Think of it as a partnership, right?
With the VA loan, that equates to usually around anywhere from $1,200 to $1,300. Now, that does not mean all closing costs. Because keep in mind, we've talked about before, closing costs are an accumulation of essentially 3 or 4 different entities getting paid. First one, lender, then you've got title company, you've got your escrow accounts, you've got the insurance, and you've got the state and property tax stuff being collected. What we remove is the lender portion of that. Now there's still going to be title fees associated. There'll still be a collection for your escrow account. There'll still be paying the county the applicable fees for filing a deed of trust. So, but it does drastically decrease the amount of money that you have to pay up front at your closing. Now the other thing we can play with is interest rate rebate credit, which basically means we can look at the interest rate and maybe elect to take a little bit higher interest rate to get a rebate credit that is then utilized to cover your closing costs. This might make sense because in our current market, if we're at a higher interest rate, knowing that rates are going to eventually come down, VA allows for something called a VA streamline. A VA streamline is a very simple refinance. So you can think about it this way. You may be in this particular VA loan for 2 or 3 years. And if that rate drops a half a point, we can streamline that loan without having to verify income and all that stuff again. Is basically using the idea of if you're making your payment at this interest rate, you'll probably make it at a lower interest rate.
This is one of the biggest magical things that exists in the VA land, is being able to do this streamlined refinance.
Very easy process.
When you're working with a lender that understands the full life cycle cost of what it takes for you to buy this home, they can help you understand when it might make sense to do one of these streamlined refinances. And we might even argue, if the lender that you're working with right now that is helping you procure a home through the mechanism of a VA loan, if they aren't already talking to you about when it might make sense to do a streamlined refinance, maybe it makes sense to find another lender to talk to that has that bigger picture in mind.
Because as an example, let's say that there's let's say there's a $400,000 purchase price, and let's say you have $4,000 in closing costs. Looking at an interest rate, a par rate, which means that you're not making a rebate credit and it's not costing anything. And let's just hypothetically say that rate is 5%. It might make sense to look at maybe 5.25%, because at 5.25%, you might be getting back a $4,000 rebate. That $4,000 rebate will be utilized to pay your $4,000 in closing costs. At that point, the payment difference be about $112. So you do the math and say, all right, if I'm saving it's going to be a $112 difference a month, that's going to be essentially just a little bit over $1,200 a year. How long does it take to recoup that $4,000? As long as you refinanced within a 4-year period, you've recouped that initial $4,000 investment.
This is pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things at play, but they all kind of ladder up to one big key thing. And that is that the government wants to make sure that our veterans are taken care of. And that means, though, just like any other government program you've been involved in, there is a plethora of options for you to choose when you're navigating through the mechanism of getting a VA loan.
Not just options, a lot of potholes.
Yes.
It's government. So there's all these little things that go through the process that can really gum up the works. It's so important that you work with somebody that does a lot of VA.
To stop you from overpaying for something,
Yeah.
But I would also say to leverage your opportunity to pay very, very little for something that can be worth a ton in just a few years.
As you can tell, VA is near and dear to our heart. We want to make sure you're serviced and you're taken care of.
VA loans can be a fantastic way for you to generate wealth in real estate, or a fantastic way for you to just buy the next home that your family needs when you PCS to your next duty station. Watch our other videos about the home buying process. Any questions that you have, send them our way.